Recorded. Okay, I am your host, Watson-Morrow, Associate Director of Career Services, Business Careers. And today I have Nick Martinez, who is the Associate Director of Career Services, Arts, Science, and Education. As my guest today, we will be discussing leadership and lead by example skills. Nick Martinez is the career specialist at Florida Southern, working primarily with students in the arts, science, and education. His background is in leadership development, specifically focusing on how to develop leadership programs at institutions of higher education. He's super excited to speak about leadership and leading by example and what that means for young professionals in their respective fields. So good morning, Nick. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, morning. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited. Always excited to talk about leadership. So today is no other. So excited.
That's awesome. I know I did introduce you, but why don't you tell us a little bit kind of about yourself and your journey here at Florida Southern and why you're so passionate about leadership?
Yeah. So I think it all, I was like most students, I went to university or college, and I was kind of unsure with what I wanted to do. I didn't really have a direct path. I always envied individuals like my wife who kind of like knew what they wanted to do from sixth grade on and were able to pursue that. But my path was a lot more windy and weavy, if that's a word. And I got to college and was able to really meet some pretty impactful individuals that allowed me to really study and listen to them talk about leadership and this concept. And at the time, I was an athlete. I played sports in high school, played sports in college. So I knew leadership in the frame of just, a captain on a sports team or, leading by example on a sports team, but I didn't really have a full grasp on it outside of that context. So through the duration of my collegiate career, I was able to study it further and then kind of pursue a master's degree studying how you develop leadership programs for higher education, and then how you help students develop their leadership identity and develop an understanding of what leadership is. I've been able to teach courses at different institutions that kind of are all surrounded or I guess revolve around leadership and how we as individuals get to develop our own styles, techniques, everything like that. So I'm always excited to talk about leadership, mainly because there's so many reasons, but it's so different. Every person has their own definition. Every person subscribes to a different type of leadership or a leadership style. And when you really get to study it and identify, wow, I really resonate with that, or, oh my gosh, I hate that style of leadership, it really starts to like connect some pieces and connect some dots. So I just love having those conversations, not only here, but with students one-on-one. And so, just like my energy's coming across. So I apologize if I'm like, super pumped, but just happy to be here to talk about leadership in any situation. So yeah.
No, never apologize. That energy is infectious and very welcome. So wonderful. That's awesome. So what is your definition of leadership?
Oh yeah. So the thing, and what I will is I'll preface it. I never like to give straight answers. My favorite answer is I don't know, it depends. So if I ever don't answer the question directly, I'm getting to it. It takes me a while to kind of get there. But my definition of leadership has shifted over the years and continues to shift. When I was in college, my original definition was to influence a group of people. It was just to kind of like influence them, whether it was power dynamics, whether it was power in general. You kind of have command of a group of individuals and you influence them. The thing with that is you can influence them both positive and negatively. And I don't necessarily think like an actual true form of leadership is it has to be a kind of a leadership. It has to be formed around morals and ethics. It has to be kind of grounded in the individual who's leading you all. So it kind of helped me shape my definition further. So what I've slightly landed on, and like I said, it's always changing, is I think leadership is threefold. One, it's understanding that when you're not in a situation of leadership, you are a good follower. You're able to understand and learn from the leader that you're under, or the leaders you're under. So that's the first thing, is to be a good follower. And I think we can talk about that a little bit later. B, it's to promote growth and success and change in the individuals that are surrounded by you. You're always trying to help the people around you, including yourself, grow and strive for success in their life. And I think that's a crucial part of my definition of leadership and my kind of outlook on leadership. And then C, or the third principle or the third pillar, is that it's built around relationships. And I think if we don't have that third pillar, we don't have leadership at all. It's built around relationships, and in a relationship, you would never want to be the person, or never want to have someone in the relationship that's always berating you, talking down to you. You would never want that. So I think, for leadership, relationship, it has to be built around successful relationships, healthy relationships. And how that often looks is leading from, which is kind of topical today, leading from the back, and leading from promoting others to push themselves up and further. So again, super convoluted, and it's not like, that's the thing I love about leadership, is it's not like a straight and narrow path. It's something that you'll form over your time of understanding leadership things. So again, relationship based, it's about growth, and so it's constantly growing. So
No, I like that you touched on following, and then being worthy of followership. I know we're gonna probably touch on that a little bit later, but that was something that I learned as well. Like, you don't just, are granted this position of leadership and then people just automatically fall in line and do what you say. You have to actually earn the privilege to be followed. You have to earn that followership in order to be an effective leader. So yeah, I'm interested when we dive a little bit deeper into that a little later. So tell me, what are some of the leadership theories that you have either studied or that you ascribe to, or that you kind of have, you're willing to put some merit behind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you're not familiar with leadership theory or maybe leadership practice, the first book that I would recommend is Nordhaus. It looks like it sounds like Northhouse, but Nordhaus is how he pronounces his name. It's by Peter Nordhaus. It is kind of like the dictionary is probably not a great word, Bible is probably not a great word, but it's like the place where a lot of people go to first understand leadership theories. So in Nordhaus, there's about 15 to 20 chapters, and it covers all types of different leadership. It covers behavioral leadership. It covers servant leadership, authentic leadership. And the thing is, it does a really great job of encapsulating what those mean, and why maybe they're important in the literature today, or maybe why people are practicing those leadership theories. The ones that I always come back to are especially when I was studying in undergrad, is this idea between transactional and transitional, or transformational leadership. So transactional, if we're not familiar with that, it's I like to think about it as like money, right? So transactions, you go to a store, you buy a banana, you pay 59 cents, whatever it is for a banana. That's transactional. And in the leadership world, transactional leadership is oftentimes like your manager telling you need to do that, and then you going and doing that. There's no background to it. There's no information provided. And that was really my first look into leadership. And the reason why I still love this as kind of like the tip of the iceberg for a lot of leadership theories is when you look at transactional, you start to understand some of your relationships in the past of, leader and follower, or coach and player. Start to realize some of those relationships were transactional. And where I want us to go is move on to the transformational perspective, and really push past this need for, I do this, you give me that, to I do this because I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or I want to be able to grow. And you're making me do this because you see a pathway forward, or you can see success and growth in my life. So the thing that I really love about Nordhaus as a book is it doesn't necessarily go deep in any of those theories. It just is topical, provide you with an overview. So the ones that I would say, transactional, transformational is definitely the first one that really clicked with me. Another one is servant leadership. We oftentimes hear, especially if it's connected to maybe a faith or a religion, servant leadership is this concept of serving the individuals that you're around. And I think that's incredibly important when we look at leadership. When we look at bad leadership, oftentimes they're not servants to their people. They're ruling like kings. And you can see this weird power dynamic start to shift. And then the third that I mentioned earlier was authentic leadership. And this is really where we get to, as teachers, facilitators, educators, get to work with our students to help them understand authentic leadership is you being authentic. And as easy as it sounds, it's really difficult to reach that. So just to kind of touch on those three, we'll dive more into some other ones like followership that I started really subscribing to and loving as a theory. that doesn't get as much limelight or enough people talking about it as we probably will today. So yeah, I would say those three are great ones to start with and kind of get your feet wet in the leadership realm or leadership world.
Oh, excellent. Actually, my whole thesis was on transformational leadership. I ascribe to that particular theory myself. Just that, and that is all encompassing of like, inclusivity, being authentic, being genuine, serving, servant heart kind of, and just the, not the do as I say, not as I do, but definitely walking the walk and talking the talk. And that's when I find that you can increase your followership and increase the buy-in from your employees. I mean, you're embodying the mission and vision of whatever it is you're trying to instill in them. And so when you're doing it, it's easier to see your leader do that and then kind of fall into that versus like the transactional, like you said, just do this, don't question me. This is, just go. I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit into leading by example. So what do you mean when we say like, let's lead by example?
So I can kind of compare it to the photo that is on the background, the little circle with the 3 stick figures. I like to think of leading by example and I'll have a couple examples for different students that can kind of, or different people that can kind of see it or frame it in their own perspective. But if we look at the stick figures there, I think leading by example kind of starts in that place. It's the person, maybe the leader or an individual that you're around that is holding up the flag and saying, this is the standard, and I hold myself to the standard, and I would like to hold you all to that same standard. So whether it's, again, ethics or morals, or you're in a company that you're wanting to do good by the customers, you're wanting to do good by your employees, you're holding up this flag and saying, this is the standard, I ascribe to the standard, I subscribe to this is what I will do, and I would want to push you all to reach the standard. Now I think in another context would probably be sports. I think that's a really great example of that. You can see it if you're a football fan, or I'm personally a soccer fan. So when you have your one captain on the field, they're running around in circles and exhausting themselves over the frame of 90 minutes. When a foul is committed, or the person that's allowed to go talk to the referee is the captain, and that captain's supposed to hold themselves in a higher, not necessarily a higher esteem, but they're supposed to talk respectfully. They're supposed to convey their opinions respectfully. And there has to be some level of like almost humanity in that to the ref. It's not a robot. It's not a machine making calls. It's also a ref. So I think I like to see, leading by example, and some pitfalls of leading by example as well through the lens of sports. There's been a lot of captains that have kind of not done this. And what happens is they get that stripped away from them. And it kind of can corrode the morals of the team as well. So same thing, if you look back to that example of the stick figure, they're holding this flag up, but they're not actually doing what they say they're doing. What does it do? Is it corrodes the entire team. It corrodes the entire environment, because everything we're doing is built on a lie. Our leader is not doing it, so why should we do it? It's this. So leading by example can be a slippery slope, but it's something that I would, when it's done right, is so impactful and it can be so powerful.
Yeah, and when it's done wrong, it can also be impactful and powerful. I can think of a specific example where our leader said, everybody stays, we're in this all together, no one goes home. And then we had an incident where we were all staying, and he looked at us, he said, oh, have fun with that. And he left, and he was our leader. And we all like looked at each other like, are you kidding? Like, that's not what's supposed to happen. Like, you're supposed to be here with us. So that, it takes away from, your desire to follow someone when they are not authentic, or when they're not willing to do what they're asking you to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that. I like your examples a lot, Nick. How can you, how does leading by example though, connect to leadership, in the organization? I mean, I feel like you kind of touched a little bit on this just now, but can you just dive a little deeper in that? How does that connect to full on leadership?
Absolutely. So what I think it does is when we're leading by example, we have to ground our example based on the principles of whether it's the organization or the team. So let's say, again, let's use these stick figures. When I think of a good leader that's leading by example and is conveying good leadership in their organization, they're sitting down with their team and they're saying, these are the standards. These are the standards that we all agree on that we should do. You agree that we should do X, Y, and Z. You agree that we should do A, B, and C. I want us to all agree to commit to this perspective, commit to this leadership style. And then I would like all of us to convey that. Me as maybe the senior, partner at the firm, or the senior individual at the organization, or maybe just the captain on the team, I will be the one that's pushing us from the front, holding that standard and committing to that. But that doesn't mean that all of you aren't doing the same thing. So I think that's really where it connects to leadership, is it's grounded in your own individual perspectives, but it's also grounded in the perspectives of your team. And I think that's where sometimes, Megan, like you said, the perspectives of maybe leaders being like, I'm going to cut out early today, you all don't need me, or not hitting the standards, because to them, it wasn't the standards, but it was the standards to the whole team that they didn't commit to. And I think that's really where it connects to leadership. Leadership is a team, and I probably didn't talk about this at the beginning, but leadership is oriented around a team. Yes, it comes down to sometimes just one person, but on a strong team, you can't have just one person, because it's not a team, right? So you have to have other individuals that are providing input to that are committed to that organization or team. I think that's really where it starts to connect to leadership. So great question. Yeah, I think that's something that's oftentimes missed, is we just think, I'm going to do this. This is what I believe, but you're not considering other individuals that are on your team or in your network.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes, when you're in that leadership role, doesn't mean that you're always in that leadership role as a team. When I think about sports too, when we've got offense on the field, they're the ones that are leading. And then when it's defense, then they're the ones that are leading. So depending on the situation, different members of your team could step up. I know, for example, like you and Jovan always step up in the IT department.
Yeah.
You're definitely the leaders of our team in that department. So yeah, we can kind of lean on each other, but that leading by example, instead of saying like, no, I don't want to do that, or I'm not, those don't pertain to me, that's for other people to do, I think can really damage that relationship between the team.
Absolutely.
So how can students as young professionals become better leaders?
So I love this question, and I love talking about this for a multitude of reasons. Mainly because, as I mentioned before, when I worked with students in higher education through leadership programs at a few different institutions, this was my favorite part of teaching leadership. It wasn't just like, here's a theory, this is fun, let's talk about it. That is really fun, by the way. But when it gets really fun is when students are able to develop their own leadership identity, their leadership style. And the best way and the most recommended way is through a series of, if you're familiar with like this experiential learning cycle, which I kind of refer to as a cyclical cycle, which is a complete, like, you don't need it. I just like to say it's really fun to say. But learning is this cycle. You go through an experience, you process that information, you reflect on it, you input it into your growth, and you can continue to go through experiences and do the exact same thing. When we think about leadership and how we become better leaders, is we do that exact same thing. We go through experiences. We have our organizations, our internships, our volunteering. We go through all these experiences and we process the leadership happening around us. So when I was working at other institutions, when I had a majority of student athletes, I would say, look at your teams. I want you to look at your captain. If you're not the captain, look at your coaches, look at other players on that team. And I want you to identify specific leadership traits, leadership styles, and leadership identities that they have and they convey. I then want you to reflect on if you agree with those, whether you think it's powerful to do that, or whether you think it's wrong that they made you run after practice because you made an error or had penalties. And I want you to process through that and identify why you agree with that, why maybe you don't agree with it, and what would you do differently. Then when we start to do that, we start to build out, okay, you know what? I understand why my coach made us run, or I understand why my boss made me kind of stay late and work on something, but how I would have handled it is in this scenario. And then what you start to do is you start to build out your own theory, your own style, by kind of reflecting on your experiences. So just like I said, in a cyclical cycle, you're going to continue to go through experiences. You're going to continue to recommend you continue to reflect, continue to process through it, and then to input whatever you're learning into your practice. So to become better leaders, become stronger leaders, is to constantly understand how other people are doing things. And then once you become leaders, to understand how you will do things, whether it's positive or negative, and whether you need to switch your position based on the individuals that you're leading. So start with the people around you and then continue to grow from there.
Yeah, I like that. And looking at yourself and reflecting where do I need to shift and pivot? I firmly believe that personal growth is in the reflection. Okay, so we have actually just a couple more minutes. So somehow I think this got started a little earlier than it was supposed to. So we're only have like 7 more minutes. I don't know how that happened. So, but we're gonna keep going. So let's see, where would you say are the best examples of leadership can be found?
So I think I kind of touched on this in the last question a bit, but truthfully, I think it's around you. So, leadership is best kind of seen in your spaces that you're in, your faculty members, your staff, your presidents in your organizations, yourself, maybe your parents or individuals that are in your life. I think that's where the best examples of leadership can be found. Whether they're positive or negative, that's for you to kind of make up and decide for yourself. But when we get to see leadership in our own life and our own experiences, that's where we can start to ground our perspectives in that. So start with around you. And then I always say, look at aspirational figures. So I always use people like Kobe Bryant for, again, when I worked with a lot of student athletes, Kobe Bryant was always one of those individuals that he was in the gym before anyone else. So when it comes to his sport, he was actually leading by example. He was in the gym way before anyone else was. He was the last person there. And the way he went about that kind of conveyed his specific leadership style. You can do the same thing with anyone else in your life, but how I recommend it to find the examples is just look in your circles around you. Look in your friend group, look in your faculty and staff, look in your people that you grew up with, your coaches, anyone that is in a leadership position, look at them. And then you start to kind of piece together, okay, this leadership style works for me, this leadership doesn't. So that's where I would start.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let's talk about followership before we run out of time. So I know we touched this a little bit on this, both of us on both sides here. So how does that assist you become a better leader?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, I think where I started and now where I'm at, I think followership is even more important than I previously thought in leadership, for a couple of different reasons. But how I like to think about followership is someone who's able to see the forest, but also see the trees. And this is the analogy that I like to use. If you can see the forest, you can see the overarching plan. You can see the directives passed down from your leadership. You can see what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're also able to see the trees that make up the forest, you can see the hard work that is being done. You can see the specific tasks that needed to accomplish specific goals and achieve different things. So when I think about followership, I think about the capacity to, if you're under, let's say, your manager or under your boss, you should, as a good follower, as a strong follower, be able to understand their directives and also understand what needs to be done to reach those directives. Without the trees, you don't have a forest, but without a forest, there are no trees. So that's where I kind of start to piece together followership. And when it comes together with your leadership identity and leadership understanding, to be a good follower, you can then understand how to be a good leader. And that's kind of the connection that I made a little bit previously, or made a bit earlier, around the idea of, if there are no individuals, you cannot be a person that leads yourself. Leadership is based on a group of people and individuals. Yes, one person can influence change, but only if other individuals agree with that change and push forth their effort, their time, their commitment to make that change happen. So followership is imperative to the idea of leadership.
Excellent. And I just lost my lights, so, so that's kind of why I went all of dark. Lots of fun things going on in this call today. Okay, excellent. No, I really believe that too. And I had never thought much about followership either until I really kind of dove into learning more about transformational leadership and just what that means, and how that just makes a more cohesive group and team, and even makes the workplace very much more enjoyable versus just like having a tyrant or somebody who's just gonna, bark orders at you.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so we just have a few more minutes. Is there any last closing remarks you'd like to give? Any last suggestions or recommendations for students as they're developing their own leader identity or style?
Yeah. The last thing, and I've kind of mentioned this throughout the conversation today, but be cognizant of the things around you. Be cognizant of the leaders around you. be cognizant of the way you react to specific things that leaders do around you, and try to work through and understand what those are. I think the more you can understand yourself and your current positions, but also I guess the more you can understand yourself in your current positions allows you to better understand yourself as a whole. And that's, again, where I think followership and leadership creates this almost like balanced, perfect yin and yang of you need followers to be a leader. You need leaders to be good followers. And I think that's this perfect thing. I think, Megan, you said it, you're never going to be a leader in every single aspect of your life. There's aspects of your life where you're going to have to be a follower. So be a good follower in that thing. I know that followership and following has always had a negative connotation in society, especially, Western American society. We're told from a very young age, don't be followers, be leaders. If someone jumps off a bridge, are you going to jump off the bridge too? No, it's this, of course not, but it's this idea that there needs to be balance to it. And I think leadership theory and literature is finally starting to come around to the idea that, hey, we actually do need to be good followers, because while I'm doing this over here, I'm also, I'm leading over here, I'm also following over here. And I think there needs to be a balance to this. So what I would kind of recommend for you all to do is continue to, like I said, be cognizant of the world around you, be cognizant of how you're responding to that world, and how you can be a good leader in the situations where you're leading and a good follower in the situations where you follow.
Perfect. Wonderful. Hey, Nick, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all of your insights and thoughts. It's very, very informative. I hope that all of those that are with us today, that you learned something, that you have some good takeaways. And I do apologize for the meeting being a little bit short, but the QR code is on the screen right now, so you can scan that for your attendance. I also put the link in the chat pod. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again, Nick.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.